screen so I can share the slides from my deck.
So I believe we have a copy of the slides here. Jamie, do you have them?
Yeah, and I don't have the ability to.
Share the screen. No. So
I think I have to make you an organizer, and I don't have the ability to do that right now. But I do have it ready to share.
But first, we have some preliminary business. So good afternoon, everybody. This is a work session of the Anchorage Assembly. We're convening to have a discussion with Visit Anchorage. Today is the 1st of November. It's 1 p.m. We're scheduled from 1 to 2. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Sure. Present at this time is Member Brawley, Member Bronga, Member Martinez, Member Myers, Member Littlefield, and Member Constant.
Okay, thank you. And so the work session today is to hear from Visit Anchorage. Do you guys want to make any opening statements or just move right into the slides?
I think we can move right into the slides. Would it be helpful if we do some introductions of who's in the room for those who don't know us?
Sure, go ahead, Julie.
Great, thank you. And then we'll be ready to jump into the slideshow. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Julie Safi, President and CEO of Visit Anchorage, the municipality's Convention and Visitors Bureau. Why don't we start, Dave?
David Kasser, Senior Vice President of Sales at Visit Anchorage.
Hello, Nicole Giles. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, and I live down in Girdwood.
Matt Warden, I'm the owner of Go Hike Alaska and Lifetime Adventures, and I'm a resident of West Anchorage.
Sure, you guys can see me or not, but my name is Jacob Lyon. I'm Vice President of Transportation for Premier Alaska Tours, the tour operator here in Alaska.
Jack Bonney, I'm the Vice President of Communications here at Anchorage.
I'm Chris Swelling, a member of the Visit Anchorage Board and a longtime CPA here in Anchorage.
Angela Johnstone, I'm the controller for Visit Anchorage.
Bristol Hind, with Visit Anchorage, Facilities Director.
Great. And then we would love to see the PowerPoint. We'll jump right in.
Thank you, Jamie. Oh, I think you got the wrong one pulled up. We could talk about the port.
I saw your agenda for the next assembly meeting. It looks like there's a lot of port discussion coming up. So, well, as she's getting that slideshow up, I'll just start and say thank you for scheduling this work session. It's always good to check in with one another and to hear what is on your mind. We do have a PowerPoint. We tried to keep it pretty short, knowing that the intention here is to have a good discussion. We probably have about 10 slides and maybe about 15 minutes. And I just want to start, some of you have heard me say this, some of you maybe have not, but I just want to say thank you. We've had a long-term partnership, and particularly since 2020, that partnership has been critical to Visit Anchorage, and I think to the city, in making sure that we got tourism back on track as absolutely quickly as possible, for not only the jobs that it creates, but the economic value that it brings to the city of Anchorage and our full community. I'm glad to say that that is behind us, and proud to show you where we stand today within the industry and for our community. So as I said, we'll try to be pretty quick through these and be open for any questions as we wrap up the presentation. So first slide, if you want to advance it for us, we want to show you samples of our work. And this is really the only show and tell slide that we have, although we could fill 5 hours with show and tell slides. But most of you, if you're in market, you're in Anchorage, unless you're traveling, you don't necessarily see our work. All of our clients are typically outside of the state, either in the lower 48 or international. Most of our work these days, at least our advertising, is digital, but there still is some need for print out there, and we are in some very key print publications. but a lot of what you see here is digital advertising that we place in a number of platforms, number of target markets, and I just have to say that we're very proud of what we put out into the broader marketing world. It all is research-based, the visuals work, the messaging work, and it's all tested and has proven itself to be very, very effective. Of course, we're lucky in that we have a very visual destination. That helps a lot. You can see right there where we've been into. Certainly our urban and wild messaging resonates. We test it regularly. Every once in a while we think, oh, we've had it for a few years, it's time to change. And then we go out in the market and do some more testing, and it still is quite effective. So that's our advertising. Many of you are also familiar with some of our publications, but probably not all. And I know you can't see this. You're hoping to have some in person for you today. But in addition to our marketing, our advertising, our promotions, we've got a number of publications, including our visitor's guide, our neighborhood guide, which really was the result of a conversation with the assembly a couple of years back, and that's proven very popular for locals and visitors. We've got our restaurant guide, and then we have some real specific publications that you may not have ever heard of, but for meeting planners and for travel advisors, for media, we have a whole different set of publications, of e-newsletters, of marketing materials that we put together just for them. In fact, we've got videos by specific audiences as well that again, you probably don't see, but it's all work that we're doing year round. When we do this advertising and promotions, you should know that we know more about our likely travelers than ever before. We've been able to do more and more research over the past couple of years and really fine tune who we're speaking to. And with all of the different platforms out there and the technology, we can also hone in more and more on who we're speaking to. In consumer research, it comes up time and again that we really do have an opportunity to be that getaway instead of that gateway. And we're certainly focused on making that change in how consumers think about us and how our travel professionals think about Anchorage. And I don't think any of you probably need convincing. I hope none of you need convincing that we have some extraordinary things in our community, both in terms of the amenities and also in our outdoor activities. And our work is to hook someone on Anchorage, show them what we have, and get them to maximize their time with us. That not only takes the inspiration, but it also takes education. A lot of people who want to come up here, they know the why, they're inspired, but we have to give them the how and the why now. And a lot of that is more educational, working with them, making sure we have the right materials and the right information for them at the time that they're ready for it. I think with that, we can move on to the next slide. And here, before I talk about all those numbers on the left-hand side, I just talked about our materials, our promotional materials, how we reach our audiences. The picture that you see on this slide on the right-hand side is really indicative of our sales efforts, which again is something that if you're in Anchorage, you don't see. But this is the trade show that was held in Los Angeles in May. Very representative of trade shows that our sales team goes out to year round. It used to be that we didn't have many shows in January, but January, December are very full on our calendar now. The market has certainly changed in working with travel trade, working with meeting planners. But this is an example of an appointment trade show. And over the course of 2 or 3 days, at a number of different trade shows we attend, you might have appointments of 7 minutes in length. You might have appointments that are 20 minutes in length. But we go out and over the course of 3 days, I checked with David this morning, some of the shows, they might have 300 appointments. People in and out of this booth nonstop, selling Anchorage. We travel with businesses who have direct product to sell. And it's really, as I said, a part of what we do that you don't see. In addition to sitting down at appointments like you see in this picture, we do trainings. Might be a room full of 20 people. It might be a room full of 300 people. Might be consumers. It might be meeting planners. But telling them all about Anchorage, how they can book, why they can book, and connecting them with resources for their travels. So again, along with the advertising that you might not see, our sales department is our largest department here, and they are on the road nonstop, making sure that we share with people how they can help us sell Anchorage if it's another travel professional, or share with people how they can travel to Anchorage if it's a consumer show. So I'm going to look at a couple of the numbers on the left. I might not talk about every single one of them, but if you have a question, please jot it down. So and these are all through third quarter. So we'll certainly be adding to these numbers by the end of the year, but total advertising impressions, 196 million out there in the larger world. Visitors guides that have been sent either by mail or viewed online, 106,000. Past research tells us that there is value to getting those guides out. People who view the guides when they're planning their trip spend extra time, do additional activities, and spend extra money in our community. So there's a lot of value to putting out that visitors guide. On Anchorage.net, to date, this year, we've had over 2.5 million sessions. Travel agents trained 8,400 and counting. In fact, fourth quarter will be a pretty big quarter to add to this number. And again, travel professionals are out there selling on our behalf. I want to jump down to media assisted, 94. While that's not the biggest number on this slide, this is how we get advertising equivalency, and helping the media sometimes could be a fully hosted trip, depending on the value of that journalist. Sometimes it can be fact checking an article that they're putting out into an important publication. Sometimes it can be providing story ideas and photos to accompany something that they're working on. So there's a number of ways that we assist media. It's very time consuming because we want to make sure they do it right and we do it right. But it does lead to quite a bit of value in advertising equivalency, that 1.87 million number that you see above there. And again, we continue to add to that throughout the remainder of the year. Visitors served in our VIC. If you're not familiar with that, it's our visitor information centers. We have the log cabin downtown. We have the visitor center right behind that, and also out at the airport. And 180,000. We'll exceed that by the end of the year. Again, this is a service to our visitors, to our residents, to the municipality, making sure that we connect visitors with services and the activities that they're after. And then that last number, 94% industry satisfaction. By our contract, we need to do a survey every year with our members. And we're really, 94% represents really where we are almost every year. And we're very proud of that number as well. We ask our members if we're providing the services they need, if we're delivering needs to their email, if we're delivering customers to their door, and if they like the way that we're promoting and positioning Anchorage. So this is an important number that we watch very closely, and we also take comments very seriously through that survey mechanism. Go ahead and you can jump to the next slide. And as you're doing that, I'll talk about conventions sold EEI. That's the economic impact in Anchorage. You can see that through third quarter, we are at $110 million. 110 million was a goal that we had set for many years. And we've met it this year in 2023, where we are in conventions held for impact, $134 million. So the value of those conventions really spread throughout the community. Conventions and meetings are one way that we expand our season, because a lot of those conventions are coming September through April. And so we're keeping restaurants, retail, hotels. That is one of our primary tools in attracting visitors here. in the winter time and in the non-summer months. So that's an important number, and the sales team has really done a great job in reaching that goal now and exceeding it. So those are some of our internal outcomes. Right here, you see some of the community outcomes. Airport travelers, notice we're unable to split out visitors from residents. So this is just an indicator of what's happening for both of those groups. In 2024, year to date, we are up 4.5%. We're actually doing some research with the airport right now that we might be able to get a decent split in the future of residents to visitors. We're hopeful that we can come up with a more visitor focused number in the future. South Central cruise capacity this past summer was 456,000. This was relatively flat to 2023, but it's significant for our community. Average visitor spend $1,400, and this is their spend in Anchorage. This does not include airfare or the cost of a cruise. And so that also goes throughout the community, from accommodations to restaurants, to grocery stores, to gas stations. And then we've talked about estimated spending of conventions year to date, 111 million. The average Anchorage visit is 3.4 days. And that's for our leisure traveler. If you, we think it's a bit higher if you looked at all travelers, including business and leisure, the new term, business and leisure. And our work is always to expand the number of days, the number of overnights. We are supporting families. You can see there that 1 in 9 local jobs can be directed to tourism. And we also do a resident survey, and nearly 90% of residents recognize the positive impact of tourism for Anchorage. And I think we can move to the next slide. And I know this is a lot, we're not going to go over each graph, but I wanted to give you a sense of some of the data that we look at regularly, in some cases weekly, in some cases monthly. And this represents hotel performance and demand. On the assembly and within the administration, you're probably more familiar or most familiar with measuring bed tax revenue as an indicator of how tourism is going. But we wanted to pause just a minute on this slide to go a layer deeper. So the dark blue line, if you can see that, is 2024, and we're comparing to prior years all the way back to 2019. The red line, that outlier, shows you 2020 and how far we've come, what we've dug our way out of since 2020. And then what you see in bed taxes is a function of that bottom right chart, which is hotel revenue. So 12% of revenue is what goes into the bed tax figures. What you may not see here or easily is daily rate. And for the whole municipality, it's a very healthy $211, the daily rate for hotels for the entire 12 months. Broken down a little differently. The highest rate is earned in July, which this past summer was just over $300. And then the lowest month last December was just under $139 per night was the average daily rate for rooms. But $211 year round is really a very healthy rate for Anchorage. So tourism promotion will benefit from that. The city will benefit from that. The convention centers will benefit from that. Let's see. I'll also point out, obviously, summer, you see by that nice bell curve there is the highest amount of bed taxes come in at summer. But if you look at the revenue down in the lower right, you can see for 2024, excuse me, the dark blue line, January, February, March, April, we're seeing nice increases there. Those are becoming really great months for Anchorage, and not by accident, I don't think. So we're pleased to see the growth of the revenues in the winter time. I think we can go on to the next one. So a little bit on bed tax history. This is taking all those charts and looking at bed taxes specifically for all of Anchorage. 2017, you can see our projection to 2025, relatively flat to 2024. You also see by the color coding the split between tourism promotion, which is reinvesting into the tourism industry to try to keep this growing. The convention centers, which has been a very healthy and successful model. The convention centers are really holding their own through the use of the bed tax to support both the operations and the bond debt. And then you also see what's going into the general fund for the municipality. So demand has stabilized, which is why I think we're projecting relatively flat for the coming year after talking to a lot of our businesses, looking at some of the national trends. Demand is stabilized and competition is really getting more and more aggressive, especially overseas. Europe is particularly aggressive right now. Add to the competition from international, the competition that we have with domestic destinations, who are in many cases, we just looked at Seattle and Portland, outspending us by about 2 to 1. And they have drive markets nearby. They can put an ad into a market and ask people to come drive to their location for the weekend versus having to get on a plane and fly for 3 to 5 hours. So we do have a few obstacles, but we also know we have the best destinations. So, but competition is getting very strict since the pandemic. And we have a few obstacles to overcome, as I said. But we're putting the gains that we see in that orange bar in the tourism promotion, we're putting that directly into the marketplace. We're not increasing our staff size. And like you've all experienced, costs are getting higher and higher as well, whether it's because of the travel that we're doing or the media that we're interested in getting into. Certainly, all of our costs from publications to media placement to travel is increasing. And so we're growing our budget, but we're also seeing increased costs. And I think we can jump to the next slide. And this is just looking at what's going into the general fund. We're proud to be contributing to the Muni's budget. And of course, the largest piece of this pie here, although if we were able to like really dive in and spend time on looking at property taxes, this property tax piece of the pie just represents hotels. It's the easiest data set to get to. But I think if you were to drive down 4th Avenue and look at all the businesses there, you can expand the effect of property taxes from the tourism industry going into the general fund. But probably the two that are easiest to discern are the hotel bed tax, the portion that goes directly to the general fund, as well as the car rental tax. So while our budget's growing, we're proud that we're also contributing more and more to the municipality. This also doesn't account for alcohol taxes from restaurants or other sources of revenue. This split, sharing the taxes between tourism reinvestment, between the general fund and between the convention centers, has been really successful, I think, for all the parties involved. And it's been between tourism reinvestment and the municipality, it's been a 49-year partnership. We are excited to be approaching our 50th anniversary in 2025. Next slide. I think we're really close to the end. So future and focus. This is just kind of where are we going? What comes next? Alaska's incredible. Anchorage is incredible. But few consumers, few meeting planners choose it on their own. They have to be sold and they have to be walked through the process. So attracting the next batch of visitors means consistent marketing in a landscape where domestic and international competitors are vying for our share of the market. Right now, the wealthiest travelers are still traveling, but we're seeing a softening and a concern among travelers whose household income is under $100,000. So we need to, again, be consistent in our marketing and reaching out. Our focus is on drawing the independent and group land travel, extending their length of stay, and also managing cruise travel and reaching cruisers to tell them why they should plan an extra few days before or after their cruise in Anchorage. Certainly have an emphasis on winter product build out, and we're really excited about all of the new development and the enthusiasm around Indigenous cultures. And we're finding ways to make sure we include that in all of our messaging year round. And before I conclude, I just want to say a note about Haiti Days. I hope you've heard of it. If not, you will be hearing of it very soon. This is a new campaign that we're putting together for winter travel for the time period just after Thanksgiving, so late November through the end of December. We recognize there's a ton of activity taking place in Anchorage already at that time, from all of the many holiday markets to aurora viewing, to dog sledding. Light seeing is still a very popular winter activity. Anyway, we're putting a campaign around all of that. Haiti, if you don't know, is the Athabascan word meaning winter. And so we thought it was a great play on words. And you'll be seeing promotional marketing. It will be directed at residents, but really directed to start to people in Fairbanks, people on the Kenai Peninsula, people in the Mat-Su Valley. If they're coming in to do their shopping anyway, we want to make sure they consider going to a Broadway play, that they consider going out to, you know, one of our bars to see local entertainment, that they consider adding an overnight where maybe they hadn't considered that before, to take advantage of some of the markets and the tree lightings and all of the activities that take place at that time. So we're really excited to be bringing a new campaign, starting off small, and eventually we'd love to see this be a regional promotion that we can do down to Seattle and Portland and beyond. So with that, I think we end up on a question slide, and I don't know if you're able to play this video. We would love to. We've put a lot of work into video. This is just a taste, a 2-minute taste of some of the stories that we've been able to capture.
No, the video did not get sent over because it made the PowerPoint too long, and or too not too long, too big of a file for our servers to manage. And so that's it. But I do have at least one question in the queue, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. And I actually have a few questions, so I'll just ask 2 right now, and then I can go back in the queue. One is if we can go back to the slide where you showing basically our revenue. It was the series of charts with the bell curves, because I was curious. I don't think you covered in more detail what the daily supply is. And I was just curious because it looks like it really dips in February. Just if you could explain the supply versus the demand and how those are separate from the other ones.
Yeah, certainly. So the supply is the number of hotel rooms available any given. I mean, they track it daily, but this is reported average monthly, and it's interesting because we always hear people talk about, you know, nonstop growth in hotels, especially in Midtown, but really almost all of the growth that we saw in hotels was completed in about 2019. There was a span where it seemed like every time we turned around, there was a new hotel opening. Sometimes the supply drops. For example, the Hilton is going through a big renovation and they might pull 200 rooms out of inventory for 3 months while they're renovating that tower. Sometimes supply drops because some of the smaller inns may close seasonally. So the supply drop, I think one thing to note on this chart is it's 8,400 rooms at the very top, 7,800. So that steep drop, if that chart went all the way down to 0, would not look quite as steep as it looks, given how that access is numbered. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And then I'll just observe too, it's interesting to see the difference between demand, which kind of seems to track a lot closer, versus revenue. And part of that, of course, is the price increases we've seen, some with inflation. And also, I think we've just seen an escalation of prices. So I just wanted to note that as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And then, yeah, thank you. And then my other question, my other question is just on demographics, not to go into super detail, but you mentioned, trying to attract folks, cruising, and then of course your income level really impacts whether you can afford to come up here in the first place. So I just wonder what changes you guys have seen or are tracking over the years. Is it mostly older folks coming here, or is it really all ages, and kind of what you've seen over the last maybe 10 years?
Yeah, I would say certainly the age has come down over the last 10 years, and family travel is increasing. They're not just going to Disney World anymore. They're coming up to Alaska. And I think adventure, it used to be that it was the older visitor who maybe looked at Alaska, and now it's a much more immersive experience that people are looking for. It's funny, we have 4 primary personas, and I don't know if you want to go into depth here, but we can, or we can have another meeting. And but all of the personas kind of look like these 2 guys here.
Really attractive.
All right, so thank you. Next, I have Ms. Braga in the queue.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. When you mentioned sort of some partnerships that help encourage like the Matsu people to stay a night in a hotel, it reminds me of when Yes Bistro was open. One time we went in there and they had a partnership with Out North Theater. And if you were going to the theater, you got coupon for a free appetizer or something like that. So I wondered how much of that type of partnerships are going on. Another thing I wanted to mention is I went to the co-working, I don't know what it was called, but it was a week of people who have cottage industry businesses coming together to share. And I was sitting with a table of people that talked about how expensive it is to get a table at an outside convention, and that they were looking for ways that they could show their products nationwide, but it was so costly. And I wondered if there was any room in Visit Anchorage to help amplify some of those cottage industries by allowing them to be part of some of your marketing of tourism tours. And maybe that's just something that can't happen at all. But my final thing is, how would you, so the 3 things, the last one is, how would you help amplify tourism in the east side of Anchorage? I know a lot of the focus is downtown, but I know that, we have Native Heritage Center, Botanical Gardens, and I want to hear how you encourage people to step outside of the main core and get to those places.
Great, thank you. I think maybe we'll start with David on your second question on the co-promotion and booth shares and.
Yeah, so we really work hard to have our members engaged with us, not just here locally, but out on the road, as we call it. And we have to make sure that those members are market ready, so that when they go to a show, that their product, that they know what to expect and how to deliver and how to work with travel trade and all that. So we work with them to get them there. And then we love to have them out on the road with us, because there's nothing better than having them there to speak from their experience, why they run an Airbnb, or why they lead hiking tours, or that kind of thing. That's the kind of connection that a lot of tour operators and travel trade want to have. And so let's say an average cost to be at a trade show is $5,000 with the booth space, the table, all the shipping and all of that. And typically we'll charge somewhere between $300 to $500 to $700, depending on the show. So they would have their travel costs, but they would be able to have that presence. There's easily somewhere between 12 and 20 different shows that they can participate in through the year. Some shows don't allow us to bring additional people, so we carry the message. And so we're engaging with those folks, you know, if they can't be with us, that we know about their product. But when we can take them on the road, it's a great experience. And the thing that I'll just add to that is if you have a lot of Alaskans together, all in Los Angeles at the Travel Adventure Show, all selling together, they make a connection, and that expands that members' business network and sales network exponentially to everyone in that room that's selling Alaska year round. So it really does have a great amplifying effect.
And I think we'll have Matt just talk about East Side. I can just tell you from our efforts, you know, we know from Cluton and beyond to Birdwood and beyond, we sell the entirety of the municipality, but Matt certainly would be a good representative of getting tourism out of just downtown.
Sure thing. So yeah, Matt Ward and I own Go Hike Alaska and Lifetime Adventures. Go Hike Alaska is a day hiking tour operator here in the Anchorage area. We serve primarily the Chugach State Park and showcase what it has to offer. And, you know, outside of like Muldoon and the Anchorage specific area, we take folks into areas that are close. Like we spend a lot of time in the Eagle River area. We take folks out to Barbara Falls, Eagle River Nature Center. We were doing Barbara Falls for a while, and then we also concentrate efforts on the Glen Alps area, Little O'Malley, the ball field. We do Sunnyside. I just took some folks up Sunnyside and Flat Top the other day. So we try to hit those accessible locations that we all consider very scenic areas. And then I also own Lifetime Adventures, and many of you know that as the business out there at Cluton Lake that offers bike and kayak rentals. And I took over from the former gentleman who owned it for 30 years, a couple of years ago. And we not only do bike and kayak rentals out there, we also do guided tours and host large groups. So my ambition is to help build that valley up, to make it more of a showcase, to bring new activities and accessible ways for people to experience the valley. You know, like some of the things that are going to help that valley grow, or having more accommodations out there on top of what you're seeing with Blue Water Base Camp. There's, you know, having a cell phone tower out there, a restaurant. We got the casino coming online here in a few years, so that's going to be a highlight for people to experience going out a little bit further away from Anchorage. And then I would, just to kind of keep it short, bring it back to some of the things that I've experienced that kind of keep me from going into more of the Anchorage Pacific East Side area, where you have military land, lots of BLM land. A lot of those are really nice, attractive areas for us to put on hiking tours, but it's usually like a permitting thing that prohibits us from showcasing that certain those areas. But there's lots of nice trails over there at Bicentennial that I would love to take people on. But it comes down to kind of permitting for me when I go into those areas. So hopefully that explains a little bit how I showcase the east side and outside of the Anchorage area.
And then we'll circle back to your first question. Sorry, we took them out of order, but the cottage, I think the smallest businesses in our community.
Yeah, I think this is the piece that we've kind of skipped over, is in addition to all of the work that we do to market and promote the MOA, we're also one of the largest trade industry organizations in the state of Alaska for tourism. And right now that means about 750 businesses. And if you're thinking they're large businesses, they're not. Far and away the largest number tend to be mom and pop, single owner operated. They look a lot more like Matt. Sorry, everybody looks like that. But I think that's one of the other bits of our work that is worth sitting down and noting, is we are the business to business meeting place to build those packages and build those deals. We know that consumers and travelers have a very large appetite for the easy button. They want to be able to link things together and know that they're not going to make a mistake and book themselves for lunch in Fairbanks and dinner in Juneau. So we're able to help the business community build those relationships and build out those packages. And then speaking specifically to cottage industries, we've made a real conscious decision in the last 2 and 3 years to buy more of our products locally when they're possible. One, because we know that our audiences want the most local product that's available to them, but two, because it also means that our spending stays in the community. And I just add, if there are specific businesses that that Assemblymember Bronga or others have, we'd love to sit down and talk to them about how they can partner with us, either through membership or through other opportunities as well. One last thing, we did at one point map all of those 750 members. They're as far north as Vero and as far south as Ketchikan, but the center mass is here in South Central Alaska. And the map of the municipality of Anchorage in particular is peppered from end to end. So as far north as Eclipse, as far south as Girdwood, all points in between. I'm sitting next to a guy who has a bus barn in West Anchorage as well.
All right, I have a few more questions from folks. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, everybody. Quick question, a couple of quick questions. I have so many thoughts. I'd love to follow up. Thank you, Julie, for offering to continue to follow up with us. But I'm thinking of Destination Anchorage specifically, and it's interesting. I think that potentially is a difference between, you mentioned urban and wild as the kind of the language of the campaign. It seems that the visitors to the wild might be different than the visitors to the urban, especially with the idea of staying in the urban, in the city a little longer and going a little further. And so they seem to be a little different than the jump off point to the wild of Alaska versus the destination in and of itself. And I wonder about that connection in terms of how we sell and who we're selling it to, and how we know what the tourists' expectations are about the city's amenities as well. Because my question would be then, how do you all see public transportation in the urban center, in the Anchorage, as a part of the visitor experience, knowing that most places I will visit have a relationship between my expectation of having access when I go to other cities to public transportation. That disappointment here meets also places that have specific visitor industry investments into assets that look like public transportation assets. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Member Myers might be familiar with this a little more than I am. In Kona, for example, on the Big Island, there's the little shuttle bus that drives around, and it's a free bus, but it's essentially funded by the visitor industry. And so I just wonder that relationship between public transportation assets and the visitor experience and how you all see that interplay working. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'll just say a couple comments and then probably turn it back over to Jack, who managed a transportation grant that we had last summer in 2023. As far as expectations, it's interesting. I mean, and you probably experience this when you travel and talk to people who've never been up here. They really don't oftentimes know what to expect. I mean, sometimes they're surprised that we even have, hotel rooms with turn on heat, much less public transportation. Certainly our visitor centers and our information online, we talk about the public transportation that we do have, and I understand what you're saying. It's not as robust as many cities, particularly cities like Washington, D.C. with the subway system. But it's not an expectation that our visitors have. I think if we had it, it would certainly be a convenience. But we did run a test grant to provide a shuttle system to some of our attractions, and it was moderately used. And maybe, I don't know if you have the numbers off the top of your head, Jack, but.
Yeah, so just give you a little bit of background. This was a project that was commissioned by the municipality and granted to us through ARPA to run a circulator transit route last summer. So they would pick up here in downtown Anchorage at the Log Cabin Visitor Information Center, would also stop at the Aviation Museum out at Lake Sonard, and then also the Botanical Garden and the zoo. So it was just running in a constant loop because we perceived prior to COVID, there were a whole bunch of people who were trying to visit some of these farther flung attractions, And at the time, the way to do that was start at the cabin, get the free shuttle to the zoo, come back to the log cabin, get the free shuttle to the next thing, which felt like a huge time commitment. So the circulator transit route, I think, proved the concept that there's value of that, and it makes it easier for people to get around and chain attractions together and spread their time throughout the neighborhoods of the community. If you haven't been already, I would encourage anybody who wants to on a summer day just to come down to 4th and F Street and see the amount of visitors who are hopping on either publicly available transportation, catching an Uber, catching a hotel shuttle, catching a loop tour, but also jumping into one of those free shuttles to get out to the Alaska Native Heritage Center or the zoo or the botanical garden. I think there's always value in making transportation easier for people to get to, but I think it might undersell the amount of transportation that's available to visitors to get farther outside of the downtown core.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll pass it on. Just one follow-up note would be the folks at the Alaska Native Heritage Center have asked us for looking into the bus route that was discontinued. They have asked us to look into the normalization and institutionalization of the route, of the transit route. And so I think it's just to highlight those importance of those loops, of those connectivities. It seems that there is a need, and it is a little interesting, back to potentially taking it a little further into your own thought wheelhouse. And again, we could follow up on this, the difference between the wild and the urban in the branding, in that I don't want us to be a city that relies on the low expectations of the stuff they don't think we have, right? That's not necessarily the positive branding space that I want us to be, that they're excited that we have heat in a room, but that's cool. Yeah, I understand. I even understand the hokiness of that. As a brown person, I hear these things often in different ways reflected in the surprise of things, but I don't want our low expectations to be a baseline of any sort. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Right, thank you. So I have myself for, it's probably more of a comment than a question. I look at the average spend was 1,400 for a 3.4 day stay. I can't imagine how those numbers add up. I'd love to see the back end of that. $1,434. It looks like it barely cover your room in Anchorage at this point, with the way rates for rooms have changed over the last 3 years, and especially in the summer. But I know that's an average. There was a slide that demonstrated that the revenue that has been dedicated to this has increased by $5 million a year from what's kind of been the historic average before the pandemic. And I just want to put it out there that there is a lot of pressure to look at the allocations, look at the requirements under the charter, and really consider if this is the only investment we should be making with those revenues. And so I just want to be very clear in stating that, since we're having this work session, that those conversations are happening, that the monopoly kind of these dollars may not serve the interests of the full community in the conversation about tourism and tourism investment. So I just want to be the one to say that, so that it's out there. It's not something we're like ready to dive into today, at least not that I'm aware of, but I just want to make sure everybody hears that conversation is starting to circulate. So Anna.
Before we go, can I just respond real quickly before we go to another question?
Sure.
Just on the average spend, I agree, it is an interesting number, and you think it would be higher. Just know that that's per person and not per party. And so if you've got 2 people or sharing a hotel room, or if you have a family who's visiting and staying with friends and family, they all work into that equation.
Gotcha.
So on average, it is an interesting number, but probably the couple coming up and staying 4 days is spending more than that as a party. And then thank you. I appreciate you just laying that on the table. We know those conversations are happening. We obviously think that there's value to the term is escaping me now, but value to consolidating and having one solid, consistent marketing program. But I know those conversations are happening, and we look forward to continuing and finding common ground in the coming year.
Awesome. And I definitely don't intend to communicate that I don't see great value in the work that you're doing. We just have to look at the whole picture. So thank you, Karen. Excuse me, Anna, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. And first I'll echo what Mr. Constance said, both intent to look at the big picture in our other options, but also to see the value in what you guys are doing, especially because I know it's been a few years now, but the state really pulled back or I think maybe zeroed out its advertising dollars, which is, you know, a common thing states do. So it's kind of Anchorage in the cruise industry at this point, it feels like. But that's a side note. My other question, so you mentioned expectations, and I appreciate Mr. Martinez bringing up public transit and kind of surfacing that discussion. I'm curious what you guys have heard in terms of what folks' expectations are of the city, and I don't mean the municipality, I mean the suite of infrastructure, services, businesses, right, public, private sector, all of those things within the community. Because I'm curious kind of what Anchorage is missing the most, like things that people either do expect or are hoping to see that we don't have right now. And again, I'm thinking of, you know, public infrastructure, amenities, services, but it could also be kind of private sector things. And I'll give one example. I know folks have said for years, we want a pharmacy downtown. We can't magically make that happen because it's a private business. Obviously, they need to decide to do that. But I'm just curious kind of what you guys have heard are things where we could be shoring up or things where we are not on par with other cities of our size, maybe.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll be real quick, and then I think David is probably very equipped to answer this as well. You mentioned pharmacy, downtown grocery store. I've always said if it's good for the residents, it's good for the visitors, and that's a prime example. Pharmacy downtown would be great. I mean, you know, in all areas of town. But whatever residents are missing, I'd say our visitors are missing too. But the one thing that I think comes up, a market that we aren't quite equipped to serve 100% yet, and we've been doing more and more with the market, is what we call incentive market. And, you know, a true 5-star hotel, even if it's small, we do think there's opportunity there, and David certainly hears those comments more than I do out in the field. So
Yeah, I would love to just take a moment to talk about the distinction between a tourism visitor who doesn't think Anchorage is wild enough and a meeting planner that does and has a conference and doesn't think Anchorage is city enough. And that's where that urban and wild really works. But one side of the sales department is busy showing how much wilderness is in Anchorage, how many trailheads, how many operators are taking people out to have those experiences. So we have 2,000 moose that live in Anchorage, you know, the cultural aspects and all that. And then the meeting planners and the incentive planners, they want access to all that wilderness experience, but they want a 4-star dining experience. They want a thread count. They want hotels of a certain level. And so we really are doing the dance to amplify those assets that those buyers are looking for. And in the end, we bring them to Anchorage and we show them product, and it's very similar product, but it's with a different lens for each of them. And as Julie said, we had a strategic plan put forward a couple of years ago, and one of the key things that they identified was a 5-star level, 4-star level hotel in the north of Anchorage that would help to amplify the experiences that people are having, you know, at Alyeska within the municipality and those environments, and then to the north. So that is something that we recognize among other things that have been brought up.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's something we can continue discussing as well, because I think I do appreciate what you said, Julie, that what's good for residents is good for visitors, and I think that's a really great economic development and just city development model versus trying to build things only for visitors. So I appreciate that lens. Thanks.
Any other questions?
All right, I think then, I don't see any more questions in the queue. We have 5 minutes left. Julie, do you want to kind of close us out?
Sure. Thank you for the chance. Thank you, for those who've, attended today. We appreciate, your attention, your questions. And we do really want to make this an ongoing, conversation partnership. And I hope that you've noticed we are trying to invite you to, whether it's our luncheons or our business exchanges, which members host. And anytime we're going to be in your part of the woods, meeting with your constituents, we want to make sure that we're inviting you to those events. But we've always had an open door here. We love increased participation from you, and we love to increase our participation where you see us being relevant to the work that you do. I think many of you know our board of directors or individuals. Sit down and have a chat with them as well. We certainly want to be transparent and accountable to meet the requirements of our contract and meet the needs of our city. So thank you for your time today.
Hey, thank you all so much. I look forward to further conversations. With that, we'll be adjourned for the next 15 minutes. We'll be getting back together for the final work session of a very long day, starting at 2:10, everybody. So see you back here shortly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.